Hello, I'm Graham and I hope everyone's having a great day, and welcome to part 3 in this series where I've been looking at the FZ82 from Panasonic in a little bit more detail. Thanks for your comments on part 2. I really appreciate you taking the time to do the feedback, and I've taken on board your comments from that. Now in today's video I want to show you how to use a RAW file to enable you to create out of camera JPEGs, which are sufficient for most needs of most people. Now if you need the camera to be used in larger prints or for exhibition type prints in camera clubs, then you may need to use RAW files to get the very best out of that image. But for most users, the out of camera JPEG is fine. Most of my work from all my cameras, unless I'm using full frame or the APS-C for particular uses, will be out of camera JPEG, and I've learned how to set up the cameras to give me the right conditions out of camera. Now with the Panasonic bridge cameras, especially the 1/2/30 sensor cameras, I've not found much advantage in using the RAW file. But there is a facility in this camera called the RAW Processing facility, which allows you to fine-tune those RAW file to give you the correct out of camera JPEGs. And it's in this video I'm going to show you the process where you can take one file and create multiple JPEGs with different settings. You could actually do that out in the open. So you wanted to take some landscapes, you could take one with a natural photo style with +1 sharpening, 2 sharpening, 3 sharpening. But by doing that, you're running into variabilities of light and changing scene conditions, so it's better to have a controlled situation. Now in this video I've used this doll on the desktop, taken one RAW file with its associated JPEG in the standard photo style without any settings applied to it, and there's no digital enhancements applied in camera such as eye resolution or eye dynamic, turned off for auto diffraction compensation, those sort of things. So it's a straightforward out of camera RAW JPEG file. Then I've actually taken that RAW file and processed it multiple times to show you the difference in adding things like a bit of contrast or a bit of saturation, noise reduction, sharpening, applying one change at a time so you can see the effect, and then finally applying all the amalgamated changes to produce the final out of JPEG file that I like from this particular camera. Now it's a very user-oriented setting. What suits me may not suit you. My style of photography may not be your style of photography. You may be a portrait man and you might want to have different settings, where I take a lot more landscape and nature photographies, so I tend to use a natural photo style and increase saturation and sharpening in post-edit rather than in the camera. So my settings might be totally different to those settings that you'll arrive when you follow the process that I'm going to detail next. Okay, let's have a look at the RAW and JPEG processing pipeline. Here I've got a diagram of the camera in simplicity. We've got a subject, a lens, a sensor, a unit called the analog to digital converter, which converts the analog voltage from our sensor into a digital voltage that the CPU can understand. If we're dealing with RAW, the CPU will interpret that data and write it directly to the SD card. However, if you're using JPEG processing, the CPU will take into consideration things like your photo style settings, whether you've got eye resolution set or eye dynamic, things like diffraction, compensation, those sort of things will be all processed to give a JPEG file, and then that's written to the SD card. If you've selected to shoot in RAW plus JPEG, then both files are written to your SD card. Now let's look at shooting RAW plus JPEG, and that's the option I would prefer you to choose. So first of all, you need to go into your setup and select RAW plus JPEG. So that's the RAW plus the 3 lines of dots, which gives you the fine JPEG. When you've shot a file, if you look back at the screen in replay mode, you'll see at the bottom left hand side you've got RAW plus JPEG. In the replay mode, you'll actually only see the JPEG file that's being captured. On screen now you can see the image 212, which I'm going to use as the base image for all the adjustments we're going to make in the internal RAW processor. So go into the replay mode and select RAW Processing. You can see that highlighted on the screen. You need to select the file, and this is again image 212, which is the RAW file. Now we don't begin by selecting RAW to JPEG. We need to adjust things like white balance. So here in white balance, when you press the menu set button, you can adjust the white balance that you've captured to any of the white balance presets, such as cloudy, sunny, or you can actually use the degree Kelvin scale. Now I know my studio lights are very close to 5600 Kelvin, so I've adjusted these to 5600K and then began the RAW to JPEG processing. When you do that, you'll see a screen comes up and says, do you want to save this as a new picture? And obviously you are going to do that, so you click yes. And here we create a new file, image number 213, and you can see the comparison between the original 212 and the new file 213 on screen now. Now the next operation on the carousel would be exposure compensation, but I want to come back to that later in the video. Now the next operation on the carousel is the photo style. Now I was originally shooting in the standard photo style, but I wanted to see how this image would look if I had shot it in the natural photo style. So by selecting natural and then again pressing the menu set, go back to the RAW to JPEG processing and save that as another file, we can actually see how that would look. So it creates another JPEG for us, which will be image 214. And then if we looked at 214 compared to 212, which you can see on screen now, you can see the original versus the natural, and the natural one gives us shadows that are lifted and a little bit softer in look. Well, I've gone back to the original 212 file and selected the standard photo style, and now I'm going to look at the next on the carousel, which will be contrast. And you can change it plus or minus, so you can increase or decrease the contrast. So in the first shot I'm going to increase the contrast by +3. Then you can have a look at the difference. If you save the file, here we have the original versus contrast +3, and you can see it's darkened the shadows and improved the background. You can also change the contrast to minus, so in this case we should have a flatter picture, and again you can look at that in the comparison between the original and the one with the contrast adjusted. Now the next operations on the carousel are highlights and shadows, so I decided to just boost the shadows slightly by raising them. So going into the shadows menu, going up to +3, again saving that as a new file, we can look at image number 215, and this is the shadows lifted. You can see on screen that it has lifted the shadows. Now the next operation on the carousel would be to add saturation. So in this case I'm going to add a little bit of saturation, and I'm going to go up to +2. So again, use the set command and then write the file back out, and you can see the difference between the original and the one with saturation plus. Now the next operation on the carousel is noise reduction, and it's an important feature in JPEG file production. Panasonic uses a blur algorithm to reduce the amount of noise in an image. You can actually turn it off by selecting -5 in the noise reduction section. With that, when you look at the image, you can see there is more detail in the finer areas at a slight increase of noise, but we can actually reduce that in post-processing. The next operation is sharpness, and if you're just going to use the images straight out of the camera, it's worth considering pushing this up to about +2. It gives you a little bit more sharpness in the image. So select +2 in there, create your file, and then you can compare the original to the created file. You can see there's a little bit more definition in that image. Now for the next JPEG image, I've added noise reduction at -5 and sharpening at +2 to give a combination effect to give us a slightly better quality out of camera JPEG. So here's the original versus the -5 noise reduction and +2 sharpening. Again, in post-production you could get rid of that slight noise increase. Now in every case when we've written the JPEG file, we've taken the defaults provided by the program. The RAW file doesn't have a color space assigned to it, so by default it sets it to the sRGB, which is the one we normally use, and the default picture size are the largest in its set. So you could actually change that to a smaller size if you wanted to create smaller JPEG files, such as 8 meg if you wanted to create a smaller file. Well, what about trying to recover a JPEG file that's got over or under exposure? Can it be done? Well, here you can see an image that I captured with overexposure. The blinkers are showing on the screen, and you can notice that the red, green and blue histograms are hard against the highlight area, and this is the shot we get. So by using that same RAW file, we can actually recover those highlights, so we can bring back the highlights with the minus exposure compensation. And you can see on screen now the result of that. So we've got nice bright highlights and the saturation has increased. But I've done the same by taking that same overexposed JPEG file and brought back the exposure, and again we've got a nicely saturated car with bright highlights. So it goes to show, if you keep your JPEG within sort of 1.5 or 2 stops under or overexposed, it is possible to pull back the detail. And as we saw in the previous video, if you select your JPEG parameters exactly as you need them for your type of photography, you can achieve some pretty good out-of-camera results, as you can see on the left-hand side, which is the JPEG, and the one on the right is a processed RAW file, which also produces JPEG file. Now, I did say in the second video we were going to look at the one-click RAW processing available from Photolemur. Now, this gives you that advantage of just being able to drop the file into Photolemur, let it do its thing, and then if you like what you see, you just save it as another JPEG file. It saves all the hassle of going through and learning how to use noise reduction, sharpening and other sort of things. It's just a one-click solution if you want to use your RAW file. So we'll give you an example of Photolemur here. I'm going to use this 227 file, which is a file created by the FZ80 I'm going to right click and I'm going to open with Photolemur. This is using an Apple iMac, so it's the same on Windows really. So I'm going to open the Photolemur app, and you can see that it's now opened that image, doing its thing, doing its magic, and it will come up with a final solution to that particular image. Will give me the option of being able to change the way that it looks or set some individual styles. So you can see the before image is the thumbnail from that RAW file, which is a JPEG image which is used for showing you the file content in Windows or in Mac. So that's the original thumbnail from within that JPEG file, and the one on the right is the one that's been processed through Photolemur and so added some saturation, and it's darkened the contrast a little bit. If you didn't like what you see, then if you click the paintbrush icon on the bottom right hand side, you can actually increase or reduce the effect that that's having. So there's no effect, there's full effect, and somewhere in between you might find the one that you liked, maybe there. Then you could just use the export facility to export that as a JPEG. On the left hand side you can see there are some styles, and at the moment there's none applied. Here we've got one called Apollo, so if you just click Apollo, again reprocesses that file and gives you a different look. So here we can see it's changed the coloration of the picture, so that's not one we would choose. One which is 4, which gives an orange appearance. Again, it gets changed my red, so that's not going to be applicable for this type of image. Noble again changes the color look. Again, is not going to be applicable for this style. But we've got mono, which would give us a nice black and white image from that. And again, we can control the amount of saturation. So there's a nice black and white image from that mono conversion. And the final one is evolve. Again, will process that file and give us a different color look altogether. So if we go back to the original, which was none, just adjust that back to take off some of that reduction in contrast to maybe there, and then we can export that to the disk or as an email or SmugMug, just to disk, actually where you want to save it, and you can save that file to the directory you've chosen. And that's a simple method of creating a new JPEG from your RAW file if you didn't want to bother with things like Lightroom or Photoshop or any of the other RAW file editors. And that's our file that's been created. Now at the end of that sequence there you saw the Photolemur one-click RAW processor. It's available for free download until the middle of July. At the moment it's not watermarked, but after then it will probably be watermarked. So if you want to use that for your application, download it before July. I'll put a link to that again in the video description below. I did detail it in series 2, but if you've only joined in part 3, then you should find that link in the video description. We can actually download it and use it either in Windows or in Macintosh. In part 4, I'm going to be looking at using flash with this camera, both on camera and off camera, so that in situations where the light level is low, which would need you to use high ISOs, which have their intended noise, you can actually get the ISO back down again and use the light to substitute for daylight, either in a hard light or in soft light. And I'll be showing you different techniques to create different lighting styles with your flash gun. Now, you don't need a Olympus or Panasonic compliant flash gun for this process. If you want to use TTL, then of course you do need to use that, and I'm going to recommend the Godox range. But otherwise you can use Nikon flash guns, Canon flash guns, any maker flash gun with just that center pin in the manual mode. And I'll be showing you all those techniques in part 4. So if you want to improve your flash photography, join me in part 4. So until then, thanks very much for watching. Please do take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.